and welcome to Memoirs of Successful Women. Today I'm introducing you to Vanja Beric from VaniaBeric.com, and we are going to talk all things refugee, what it's like to be a refugee coming to Australia and or any other country of the world. What is that experience like when you're a child and you actually leave your hometown? You actually, for a whole lot of reasons, which can be quite complex and traumatic, end up in another country, and how it then affects your life moving forward, and what challenges you need to overcome, be aware of, and so forth. So today we have Vanya, who is an experienced counsellor. She helps people work through their own pain and their own hardship of being a refugee, and that's because she's had that lived experience herself. She's going to be super passionate about this topic. She's also an entrepreneur, and she works to empower women, no matter what their past experience has been, to choose the future that they desire. So her philosophy is about never to understate yourself and the healing of your wounds that you can have, so that you can have a deep freedom and a love and abundance like you've never known before. So welcome to my program, Anya.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you so much. It's a delight, and actually wonderful for me to interview someone from my own country in Australia. We're at opposite ends of the world. Vanya is in Perth and I'm in Sydney. And so, yeah, I often have people from around the globe, but it's lovely to have a fellow Aussie with me.
Yes.
Shall we say.
So compare accents.
That's right. Fellow Aussies with different accents. And that's what Australia's like. That's what the world is like, right? Multicultural. And it's all about embracing each other where we're at this stage of our journey, and just fully supporting and engaging what's happening with each other. So tell us a little bit about your story, Vanya. What brought you to Australia? Let's just start there.
Well, so I was 4 when a war broke out in my country. Used to be Yugoslavia, and the war lasted for 5 years. So it was just survival mode for those 5 years, especially for my parents and my mum in particular. My dad was in prison for just being, the wrong. Being in the wrong country at the wrong time, basically. Racist imprisonment. So it was her with the 3 of us, 3 children, and so I was 4, and my oldest brother, he would have been 14. So and my sister was in the middle. So it was really, for her, it was very much survival stage, just making sure that us kids were okay, that helping out my dad in any way that she could, and surviving herself. And then once the war finished, which lasted for 5 years, we sought refugee in Australia, and we were granted, and so we moved to the Aussie land.
When you were about 11. So
yes.
For those 5 years then, now you've brushed over that. Your dad's been taken off to prison for just purely racial reasons, right?
Yeah.
Or being at the wrong place at the wrong time, and also just because you're on the other side of the war. 5 years is such a long time. So what does that actually look like? Where did you live during that time? How did your family cope? Were you even aware of what your mother must have been going through at that time? Like, you're very young.
Yeah, I think as a child at that age, we really weren't. It was just, I think my brother and my sister were more aware. They were a bit older. I wasn't. It was just, we still had, I think there was a lot of questions about where dad is. But it was just very much still, it's just an adventure, So, okay, so now we're moving here. Now we're moving here, and there was a lot of, when you have sort of, when one of the parents isn't there and the other one is working so hard just to survive and to provide, there's, I was abused throughout that time, by different people and things like that. And you know, there's a lot of, you kind of start dealing with that, but not so much. I don't think as a child you realize at any point that, you know, there is actual danger on your life. I remember when I would be walking to school, so where we were, so we moved from a different city to a different city, sort of trying to escape the war zone or go into, because obviously the war moves, trying to, you know, move borders as such. So you try and go where the war has been, because you would think that, okay, you know, that border has been decided, they're not going to come back there. So so you try and move to abandoned cities and things like that. So but still in these cities there's an element of danger, you know, because the battlefield is, you know, so when I say city, the cities in Serbia and where we're from they're very small. So think of it like a couple of suburbs, you know, so it's only an hour ride to where the actual battlefield is.
Yes.
So we would have these sirens go off, and I would be halfway walking to school. We had these sirens go off, and that means, you know, we're in danger now. You know, we need to seek shelter. And you know, at whatever age, 7, 8, 9, I would have to make a decision. Is it closer for me to just go to school because they had shelters in school, or is it just closer for me to run back home and go home? And then I could imagine now as a mother, I could imagine my mother, what she would have went through, having to, you know, she could hear these sirens because it could, you know, it would be throughout the whole city. She sent her 3 children to school. Did they make it to school? You know, what, because, you know, you don't know what's happening. So did they actually make it to school? You know, has something happened to them? Are they going to come back home? Obviously, there was no phones or anything like that. This was in the 90s. So you just kind of, I'd imagine, you know, she would just sit and pray and wait till, you know, our school was a little bit different, till 12 o'clock, till we came back home. And then like, oh, there's all 3 of you are here. Okay. You know, so nothing happened to my children.
Yeah, so it is that day-to-day anxiety, right? Or sheer terror at times when the sirens go off. It's like, I have to, you know, life goes on and you can't just not send kids to school for, you know, in your case, up to 5 years. But you're in a new area, you're in an area that's been potentially bombed out or, you know, had severe trauma through it. And then that's right, you know, how do you even move through that? I cannot have even imagined myself. I know my mother came out from France post-war and had those sort of air raids and that sort of trauma but nothing like you. I think, you know, your story is really quite incredible. When you touched before of, you know, well, as a kid, you just, you know, you obviously suffered hardship or you suffered abuse, and only what you feel comfortable sharing. But what does that actually mean for those listening in?
Yeah. So I was so I guess the way that, you know, the dynamic works, as I said, you know, like one of the parents not being there and then the other one just surviving from day to day. And it's also our kind of our culture, and you know, where we are in Europe, and at that time in the 90s, it was very much, you know, like if you weren't in school, you were just outside playing. You know, we didn't have children, you know, our parents next to us 24/7.
Yes.
So I've suffered sexual abuse from people around. You know, it happened quite a few times, you know, when I was 5, and then it happened again when I was 7, and then it happened again when I was 11. So, and it's something that I kept to myself, and I kept, I guess, hidden. I didn't really tell anyone until I started seeking help when I was in my 20s. But those are the sort of things that, apart from, and we can see in the war now, not to get political or anything that's happening in Ukraine and in other countries as well, there's this suffrage of war and losing homes and things like that, of course. But then there is that level of mental and physical, and a lot of times sexual abuse, because the family unit isn't there. There, you know, parents are in survival mode, kids are in, so everybody's just trying to survive, and a lot of things get undetected. A lot of things get swept under the carpet.
Just because everything's so frenetic, right? That's right. When you're in survival mode, you certainly don't want to bother someone if you can see that they're just sort of hanging in there. You're feeling already uncertain, insecure. But in those environments, that's right. We often think of the war environment and the bombings and other sorts of things, but actually just having children unsupervised, being in environments that other people can take advantage of that lack of supervision or advantage of the chaos that they are sort of surrounded by, because that's it. You don't have two parents watching you. You've got other parents just trying to, one parent trying to manage everything. It must be absolutely, just huge that we can't fathom. So when you came to Australia, you were then 11. So all of these things that happened in your childhood, and you're saying you didn't actually sort of get some therapy or actually process a lot of that hardship until in your 20s. Is that what were you experiencing there? What prompted you to go, you know what, I've actually had damage. I've had a psychological damage because of, the experience of living through a war-torn country, and then and having these abuses happen, and then becoming a refugee. What was actually happening to you in your early 20s?
So I started noticing, I say it as I wasn't on the same playing field as everyone else. For someone who's been through trauma, they know, or they may notice things like, so not being able to concentrate as well, having lots of memory. And now that I have studied it, I understand, I understand what happens in the brain, what each side of the brain and the connections in the brain functions, and what trauma does and how it affects our brain. So all of that stuff that I was going through made sense, but it was a lot of depression. I was suicidal. There was a lot of not being just able to function. I finished high school and then I went straight to work, and I would notice people around me had a lot more concentration. They had a lot, I was always trying to kind of catch up. So those are the kind of things that I noticed. I didn't know why. I just thought, it was something. I didn't understand why. And I remember one of, and you would know this, when you work with children, you need to have this working with children certificate.
Yeah.
And this was back in the, I don't know, early, I think something about 2000s. They used to play a video, and it used to be a woman who has suffered sexual abuse, I think, or some kind of abuse. I can't remember what exactly, but I remember vividly her explaining that she was now in a relationship. She was in her 30s. She had a husband. She had children, and she never, because I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell, and I didn't tell my parents until I was in my 30s. She didn't tell anyone, and she didn't tell her husband, and it started impacting how she was living her life. It started impacting her life. It was impacting their relationship. There was always this distance between them. She was always triggered, but she didn't know why, and things like that. Because in my head, I thought, once I get to this stage, once I have a husband, once I have my own children, it will just, I was hoping maybe miraculously
disappear.
Just be,
yes,
same as everyone else. I'm not sure what I thought there, but then that was the moment that it hit me. I was like, oh my God, this isn't going to go away. I have to do something. This isn't, there is, my scenario isn't going to change where I move or I create my own family or something happens and then I'm all better and I can sleep at night and I don't have nightmares and I can concentrate and I can eat and things like that. So that was the changing moment. I think it was that day or the next day that I went on Google and started Googling for help.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I imagine many people listening in are actually, thinking of that key point there, that often you think, okay, even though I've got all this stuff that I haven't unpacked that's sort of just sitting there, you feel like if you have some great things happen, then the things underneath will disappear. Feels like magic. It's like, yeah, that's right. If you find the perfect partner or become a mom or get a great career, it feels like, well, if these positive things enter my world, then surely that sort of sends the negative out into space somehow. And we all know, obviously that doesn't happen, but it is quite a revelation, because it makes you feel like, well, what's wrong with me? Why aren't I am very happy with this, my life as it's becoming. So it can feel very strange, thinking, well, why do I still have to deal with these other issues? At that time, were you connected with other refugees? Did you feel like you had people who understood you, or did you actually feel quite alone?
I felt quite alone from the abuse side. In my community, majority of them were refugees, and it didn't seem something so strange or something that would impact our lives, to be honest. It was just, we were in war, we came to Australia. It kind of really was it's just a story that happened to us.
Yes.
And especially to us children. Honestly, I don't ever remember us talking about, I remember us kind of going, oh, but I lived in that city. Oh, I lived in that city as well for 6 months, and then we had to move. Oh, and it wasn't at the same time, but we were very close to each other. It was more of a reminiscence than it was talking about the traumatic times. It was only once I started doing my own healing and once I started working through everything that I actually realized, and once I started working, because for me, apart from the war, there were the abuse, which seemed like a much bigger issue and a much bigger problem. Once I dealt through that, and then I started getting triggers from the traumas of the war, that's when I've kind of noticed, oh, okay, so that did actually leave an impact on me. I didn't go through unscathed as honestly I thought I did, and as many people think they do.
Yes. Did that lead you to then becoming a counsellor? Is that, the main reason? I'm imagining it is, after your lived experience. At what stage did you say, I want to actually make this my main career, so that I can help others sort of go through this experience in a better way, in an easier way, in a more empowered way?
100%. I was very much, once I started going through my therapy, once I realized, I think it was after 2 years of therapy, I started really getting into the self-healing, and because it felt powerful, I felt free, and I felt it creates an independence, but not just, we often think independence of living by yourself or financial independence, but it creates an independence that you don't have to rely on, that you can rely on yourself, a self-belief. And that's what I was missing. So I wanted to then, okay, so as I kept studying and as I then kept understanding it on a deeper and deeper and constantly a deeper level, I want to do this. I want to, as someone done it for me and liberated me, I want to liberate someone else. I want them to feel, when they have that aha moment of connecting the dots, seeing the patterns and all of those things, and then working through it, that is an amazing feeling. And then applying all of this, or sharing all of this knowledge that I have, that can help women. Okay, so that's maybe the reason why I can't concentrate, or that's maybe the reason why my memory is so bad, or that's why I'm being triggered like that, but I don't have to be. So, yeah.
Brilliant. So then, what have you noticed then, even though you're obviously an experienced professional counsellor with people who have been refugees through traumatic times, what have you noticed about, the science of, psychology, if you like, to the way and the time frame that different people heal, heal their wounds, right? So because we're all unique human beings, so that it's nice having a textbook that says if you talk through things or if you become aware of it and you find the triggers. Have you noticed a variety in the way different people have to progress through counselling and be able to sort of come out the other side feeling that they're truly, that moment when you went, oh, I feel free now, I feel empowered, I feel like I'm in control of my life?
Yeah, 100%. So I definitely get people from all walks of life, and I get people from all stages of where they are with their healing. Some, it's their first time coming to counseling, and they have a problem and they want to deal with that problem and only that problem. And, they're not ready to go deep, and that's 100% okay. That's completely fine. The idea is when you're ready, we're here.
Yes.
And then we have people who have just had enough. They've been, rock bottom. They're ready to roll up their sleeves and just get it going. They're ready to do the work. They're ready to dig deep, and it's just they want change in life. And so absolutely. So we have people come in, marry, and we have people come and say, it's relationship problems. I'm really struggling with my husband. And then once we dig deep and once we go deep and deep and deep, they're like, okay, so I came for this, but now I'm working on this and I love it. I don't want to change it.
Exactly, because you don't actually know what your core needs are at times, right? It's the same. I'm a business coach. People often come to me for one thing, and it's not until you've unpacked that they've actually found out what their other needs are, right? And so it's a very similar pattern that, all at that time is, that's right, I'm having conflict with a partner, or I'm just feeling like I'm not up, on point. My brain gets foggy. I get upset, or in a very reactive way. Sometimes you might not know what that problem is until you actually, deal with that, because you want a quick win, right? And then often once you've had that quick win, you suddenly go, oh, okay, there's actually more, and then realizing the effects of that. Let's change tack then, and then talk about when you are a refugee compared to someone like myself who's just grown up in Australia. What are the societal limitations, I suppose, that you have found frustrating or a challenge that someone who is born here would not have?
Yeah, I guess the big one when we moved here was obviously the language barrier, and having someone who hasn't been through what we've been through, they got to live on with their life. They got to live on with studying and developing, and now I want to play this sport, and now I want to play that sport, and exploring life and I'm talking from a child point of view, because that's what I experience, exploring life and building life. Because of constant movement and because of constant danger, we never really had that. We didn't really have any sports, or if we did, it wasn't. Everything was very much contained to the area that we could have it in. We still had great childhood and all of we had amazing memories, but it's I guess it's that development that and that also the diversity. So one of the things that you might have grown up in Australia is the diversity. Us coming from Serbia, we didn't necessarily have that diversity, because it was we were constantly moved, but we were moved within Europe, so it was the same type of people. And again, back then in the 90s, it wasn't so diversified and free flowing, and we didn't have the European Union as we did now, that we could kind of just travel anywhere. So those are the big differences that I found. And it was when we moved to Australia, we were just meant to adjust. It was just, now you're here, get on with the language, learn the language, get on with how things are done, what jobs are available, what careers are available, what you're available to study at uni and things like that. It was just you were plucked from a place and put into Australia, and you just meant to wiggle and find your room in there, but do it quickly because you already wasted 5 years. Let's not waste any more.
Yeah, which is a hard place to be in, particularly when you're a child. That concept of I've already just gone through this whole experience, whether I saw it as war or not, and however it was sort of, made easier for you by those, who love you, to actually come to another country. That's right. When you don't have language, when you don't know people there, you don't know the way things are, and then to assimilate quickly, it is very challenging. And it's not surprising, therefore, that it takes time for you to say, oh my gosh, I've spent, maybe even the next 5 years just trying to, get the language and try and not have as much accent even, I know my mother did that. That was one of her biggest things, is once you learnt English, then it was also to try not to have an accent because you didn't want to be a foreigner, we're definitely in a very different place now in Australia. The more accents, the better. It's kind of like very multicultural. But back then, you do anything, particularly as a child or particularly as a teenager, to actually go, I want to feel fit in, right? I want other people. I don't want to be the person singled out of difference. I actually want to be one of the crowd in a way. How hard was it for your mum then? And did your father, I'm assuming, come out to Australia with you once?
Yes, he did. Yeah, eventually.
Come as a family, and so I can't imagine then, did he come out, did you notice specific trauma with him after being sort of jailed for all that time, or what was the impact of then seeing the difference when you're coming to another country, even on their relationship?
As a child, so I guess they had it again, in the war, they had it the worse than us children did, because they understood it, we didn't. Yes. And then coming here again, it was for them, it was a culture shock. For us, we were 11. We were all children, really. Like it was very easy to go with the flow.
Yeah.
Remember when we first came to Australia? So the idea that we had of a foreign country that wasn't, America or Australia or New Zealand, that wasn't Europe, was very much what was in the movies. So and it was obviously the movies that we saw were very Americanized. So we thought we were coming to just a smaller version of America. And we thought, once, and this is my parents especially, and this is, I guess, the irony in it. They come from a country where there was war, and then they come to Australia and they were terrified to let us out of the house because a lot of times over there in America, there would be shootings and things like that. So they thought we would get kidnapped and, something would happen to us. And the real danger was where they were. The safe is here, but they were more afraid in another country than they were where they came from.
Fascinating. That is so fascinating. Exactly. Whereas it's actually been, historically pretty safe in Australia, and we don't have those issues. But it's not surprising. Now they've actually have a new beginning for their family, which is new opportunities. But also, when you've been through what they have, it's not surprising they don't want to just drop you down at the local, ballet class or soccer lessons or other things. That you're always worrying. That's right. Particularly because you don't have those connections, even with your own community and neighbours and so forth, who actually do know you and that you can trust. I think it would be an absolutely huge, complex issue. So for you then, moving forward, how was it for you to, the challenge of breaking free from society and your family's expectations of, therefore, who you were to become as this new, this refugee kid who then becomes an adult, and then now suddenly Australia is your country and it is your world, and then you marry and you have kids, and so what was the biggest challenge through that? Because you were also then coming from that your parents are very Serbian, right? So they'll 100%. So how was that? What were the challenges like that for you? And was that through your counselling personally? Was it through the counselling training that you actually went, you know what, now it's all about me rising above that and finding your voice and finding out what's important to you and being able to make your own decisions about, you know, what you want to do in your life?
Yeah. So the way my parents grew up, and especially through the war, they were in survival mode in war. And when they came to Australia, so again, that how they saw Australia, they were really in survival mode. And I don't know at what point they let go, if they let go of, we are no longer in danger. So that type of a mindset, that's the type of mindset that we grew up with and we were raised with. And it's a completely, and especially as technology advanced and world advanced and travel advanced, and we're now more, we can go anywhere, we can do anything. And being in Australia, I'm very fortunate and grateful that we can have the opportunities and we can really build a lot here. And them not having any of that opportunity where they were, it was a really, so if they had that mindset, they obviously passed that mindset on to me out of the want of protecting me. So now I am in Australia and I want to be, I'm in my 20s. I have gone through therapy and now I want more. I want more out of life. I don't want a just 9-to-5 job. I don't want just to get a husband so I can be married. I want a loving, strong relationship. I want all of these things, but I was never taught on how to get them. I was never even taught possible. It was as long as, so those minimal conditions, as long as you have a job, it doesn't even matter that you earn much. As long as you have a job and it's safe, that's good enough. As long as you have a husband, doesn't matter whether it's a good relationship or not. As long as you have him, that's good enough, as long as there's all of these. So the expectations were, again, to keep us safe, but very minimal. And I wanted more out of life. I wanted more money. I wanted loving relationship. I wanted to move people. I wanted to not have to get up in the morning and go, oh, do I have to go to work today?
Yes.
I wanted just, oh my God, I can't believe I get to do this. I can't believe I built this, or we built this. So changing that mindset was work. Again, as much as therapy was work, that was work. Each and every time catching myself, how I'm thinking, does that serve me? And then just finding out, and it wasn't just my parents, it was society. It was even a society in Australia who, and even for us as women, who we're meant to be, what are we meant to do? Oftentimes I guess there's this criteria that we climb up to. So by a certain age, you're meant to finish high school and then you're meant to get a degree of some sort, and then a partner of some sort, something, a husband preferably, because that's the gold standard, and then a child. And then when you fulfill all of these things, it's kind of like a promised land. After you fulfill all of these things, now to quote Martin Luther King, after you fulfill all of these things, then you'll find your happiness. And then you do all of these things, and then it's like, okay, I've done them. I've ticked all the boxes. Look, I've done them all. Where's my happiness? And that's kind of the cultural or the societal limitations that society puts on us. And you hit a certain stage and you're like, what happened? What did I live my life for? It kind of feels like, what did I do all of these years? And that's when we start realizing we actually have to change from within, and we have to push boundaries, and we have to think about the conditions that were put on us, and are they actually useful? The world has changed. We have changed. We changed the way you think. We don't have the same conditions as our parents did. And now are those things useful?
Beautifully articulated. So those, and it's not a judgment, therefore, on even on your parents. They've survived, they've come, they've done their very best to raise you in a certain way, and they'll also bring, the era that they're in, that generation, and also cultural differences that might have been in their country compared to in Australia, and we're constantly evolving. And so with that, that's right. It's very common that there's this it's like a prerequisite tick list before you can claim happiness, right? Once you've got credentials, that's right, finished school, got a degree, got a partner, had a baby, kind of financially secure, you can be absolutely miserable in that, but you've done what society said was the tick. And I love that actually about this new generation of particularly young women coming through going, you know what, that's not going to work for me, and I just admire it so much, and we need to have more of it, because that's right, you're enough just as you are. You're enough just waking up every day. You're enough just living and breathing. You were born worthy, that you're not better because you have a partner or have a child or have a certain qualification or a certain title, and it's hard to actually process that as a truth, right? Because there's so much influence, and less now than there historically was, but it's still, it's still bold to live and breathe that. I know one of my daughters is like that at the moment. Go, you know what? I might not marry and I might not have kids because I want to actually have my journey for my reasons. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Sorry about that, everybody. I could just feel that coming. And then suddenly people go, oh, but she might be lonely. Oh, she might, she really thought that through. Oh, and it seemed, it's like, well, that's because she's an empowered young adult now. Isn't that wonderful that 22-year-olds actually feel that way? And that's, and that's, I think that's absolutely wonderful, because that's right. There's so much. I tell you what, you'd rather definitely be happily single than unhappily married in a split
100%.
second. Second. Right. And so I think that's absolutely wonderful. But I also appreciate the real tensions, and not just coming from Serbia. I know in a lot of, Asia and other countries, that this is a big challenge for children who've come here as a refugee, or you've immigrated, and you've got that conflict of cultures, and experiences of who you are compared to what your family want for you. And they want the very best. When they've lived through a war, they just they want the very best, but they'll have a picture of what that is. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And that's a lot of time in counseling, when I ask about the parents, people sort of, they're hesitant to answer. It's kind of like, I feel like they're thinking that they don't want to blame them. And it's not, it's 100%. It's not about blaming. It's just about exploring, because they did the best they could with what they had. If they could do more, they would have done more.
Of course.
Every parent loves their child, and every parent wants to do the best they can with their child. And some just don't have the resources, whether it's financial or emotional or physical or, just the knowledge. So I'm very grateful for everything that my parents did for me. And at the end of the day, I am here because of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So those people who want to, listening to this story, and they're like, oh my gosh, Kez Wickham St. George is listening in, and she's gone and said, oh my gosh, this is an amazing experience worthy of a book. She's an international best-selling author, so always think about that. Everyone's got a book in them. And other listeners are saying, yeah, great. Love hearing this story, and I totally agree. And so when those people are listening going, yeah, you know what, I have actually just suppressed these issues that prop up in me, I know I relate to what Vanya is saying, and if they reach out to you on VanyaBeric.com, what sort of services do you provide them? Where do they even start? What does that first day look like?
Yes. So I have absolutely one-on-one sessions with me to try and work through. I build on self-belief, because I think that's where it all, and certainly has for me, that's where it all starts. When you have something traumatic happen to you, and it doesn't have to be a war, it doesn't have to be sexual abuse, everyone has their own story, everyone has their own struggle. So really, for the brain, when you look at it, and when you scan a brain, and when you look at it, very little can be considered as traumatic. Even not oftentimes people are just brought up with children should be seen, not heard.
Yes.
And that idea of expressing themselves makes them feel like, okay, so no emotions, got you, and then opening those emotions back up can be a lot of work, and it can be very hard, and it can feel like a lot to do. So building back on that self-belief, because once we experience trauma, the first thing that goes is belief in ourselves that we can handle situations. And then this is where we come from then when we're making decisions, when we're dealing with change. We're so hesitant, we're so afraid because we don't believe that we can handle it. We don't believe then, and even if we're stuck in a bad situation, a bad marriage, or a bad work environment or something like that, we weigh up, okay, so I can stay or I can go, but if I go, I don't know what's going to happen. Will I get a job just as good as this? Will I this? Will I that? And we believe that we can't handle what's on the other side of that decision. So we stay. And that's what I want. That's where I work with people, building that self-belief and building. So you are a whole. You're a whole person inside and outside, and it just radiates through. And any decision, any path that you make, any path that you follow, any decision, change that comes your way, because life is this all the time.
Yes.
You are able to handle it because you have that belief in yourself, and you understand yourself, and you have self-awareness. So I work with people either on one-on-one, or we work with in group sessions. And I also have a course launching, which is just doing all of that in at your own pace. And then we'll have one-on-ones, and we'll have group discussions, because I really, as many people as I can help, and as many people as a group, as a community, if we come together and support each other and build each other up. And I think that's, as you said, this new generation is they're really pushing boundaries. They're really pushing on what normal is, and what we label, and what they want to do, and I want us to be able to be there as well.
Yeah. And there's no age limit on this, is there? Even if you're listening in and you're going, oh my gosh, like this, it's actually just tapped into something, but I'm now 40 or 50 or 60, with counseling, it's never too late, right? Like from that moment, it's like, yes, you can just then, think of the future ahead of you. You're making a key decision to write a new narrative for your life moving forward.
Yes. And once we start working through it, and you start feeling that sense of freedom and liberty and just really pure love, you will see that there really is no age limit or difference, or where you're from or what you're doing, because you will feel that at any age, and you will start changing your life at whatever there is left to live.
I know from my family, I used to think it was really strange, because I grew up, in on the northern beaches in Sydney, and you think in a very safe place, but my family were really obsessed with like locking everything up, lock, and I'm like going, gosh, when I visit a friend after school, whatever, they don't have to lock everything. Like, we're really safe, and here we are on the beaches, and I had no idea that was actually linked to my mother. When you've been living in bomb shelters, and you've got you think people can actually come and get you, abduct you, you're worrying about your security, then it's not surprising that she'd come here as a 12-year-old, but she then as she then suddenly had kids, she didn't realize that she had wasn't trusting. She was just going on her childhood experience, right? It's amazing what can just carry forward until someone goes, you know what, you don't actually need to do that. Not saying you don't lock your house, but to the level of a fortress. Probably not necessary if you're not living in New York City or something else. And so it was really, these sorts of things are always fascinating to me. And I know I've had those sorts of conversations with many of my friends around the world who've come here or as refugees or as new immigrants. And it's amazing what you can carry. And sometimes that's it. You just don't know what lies beneath. And and it's not a terrible thing. I think you mentioned before that, to do the hard work, and it is work at the beginning. And that's a big reason why we put the handbrakes and we stay where we are, because you go, I know it's not quite right, but at least I know it. I'm I'm comfortably uncomfortable kind of thing.
Yes.
So, but by doing that, that's it. There is work. And as someone who's gone through therapy for abuse herself, I know that it actually is hard. And you kind of go, well, do I want to have it harder? I don't really. But I tell you what, it's worth every minute, because once you have that breakthrough, you have it for life, right? You just have this new confidence. Freedom. I love that word, freedom. We all want freedom, right? We want to be free to be ourselves, free to be the person that we were born to be, in whatever that looks like, and appreciating that we're always evolving, so we should be developing and growing, and you get more and more comfortable, pushing yourself in those ways once you sort of go through the steps. And the reason I love, going to qualified counsellor who has a specialty in a certain area is that you'll know the steps, you'll know the time frame, you won't be overwhelming to that person, you won't be triggering more things. It's actually, there's a science, there's qualification, there's reasons, the way you approach things at people's own pace. And I think that's so important for them to know, because particularly if you've been through a really challenging time, you don't want to then sort of have to be traumatized more, just because of the work that is required to sort of move on.
Yes. And 100%, I guess the hardest work is in the showing up, showing up. That's as really, because I always say, whatever you've been through, the story, what you're feeling now can't be worse than what you've been through. Yes. You've already done the hardest bit, which is living through it. Now is time to heal. And so when we say hard work, it's really just showing up every day. And it's the harder work is kind of like when you do a workout. Yes, it's hard work, and yes, you have to run or you have to punch or whatever your choice of exercise is, but it feels good in the moment. It feels amazing after.
Exactly.
And that's kind of the same thing. If you're going for a run, that there are limitations to what you can do, how much you can go and how far you can go and how fast you can go, and so you build yourself up. And there is the euphoria in the actual running itself, so while it's happening, but then you feel amazing after, because you now have all this energy, your mind's clear and all of these things. So therapy is kind of very much like that it's the work isn't just the same as exercising, is just putting on those shoes and getting out the house. Once you're out, that's it. There's no
Exactly. Once you've learned how to run that mile, climb that mountain, do all of those sorts of things, then suddenly it's like it's not that hard anymore. And you sort of like going, and then there's even more things, more freedom, more time to then sort of do the things that really matter, when you're unrestricted, unrefined, because you can actually just let go of, and release those things that have been keeping you back. Oh my goodness. It's been such a great conversation today, Vanya. And for those reaching out, go to VaniaBeric.com. She will definitely love to, just go to her website, which is a beautiful website, by the way, and just have a little snoop around there. Reach out to Vanya if you'd like to, even just chat about your circumstance, see if any of her services will be of value for you at this time. I think, and I thank you so much for being so open in your sharing today. I know that really helps people connect, because we're never the only one, right? We can sort of feel like no one understands us, and I'm seriously the only one in this situation. But unfortunately, a lot of people around the world, relate to you at this time, and there's definitely a fantastic opportunity to just level up and step into that new space of so if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling just emotional, if you're feeling like, what is wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with you, right? So nothing's wrong with anyone. It's actually just, reach out and have a chat with Vanya. And I wish those listening in the very best in their next chapter. And thank you for being on my program today, Vanya.
Thank you so much.